So, Wednesday's spending review announcement is looming ever larger. One local study suggests it could herald an era of mass unemployment, with 80,000 public sector jobs to go in our part of the country alone over the next 6 years. The government has placed its faith in the private sector to take up the slack. So Friday's announcement that Jaguar Land Rover is to keep both its factories open at Solihull and Castle Bromwich couldn't have come at a more welcome or indeed a more politically significant moment, could it? But we'll need many more good news stories like this to keep things sweet. That same study from the West Midlands Regional Observatory warns the cuts will result in large-scale job losses in the private sector as well as the public. Well, our business correspondent Peter Plisner joins us now live from Chamberlain Square in central Birmingham. Peter, that report from the observatory sounds a bit like a doomsday scenario to me. Are their figures really to be believed?
Well, Patrick, we believe they are reliable. The information's been gleaned in part from data provided by the government's own budgetary responsibility organisation. Now, while we know that thousands of jobs are likely to go at places like Birmingham City Council and other authorities across the region, it's the impact on the private sector that's still causing much debate and uncertainty. The public face of Birmingham City Council. What used to be a neighbourhood office has now been rebranded as a customer service centre. The changes here mean that instead of having to wait in long queues, people can get information from terminals like this, and for the first time they can book appointments from home. Crucially, the use of new technology has helped the council reduce staffing levels and, although not part of the spending review cuts, ultimately save money.
I honestly think that Birmingham City Council is in the vanguard of our modernisation programme, and I think that this holds us in good stead, not only as far as being good custodians of public resources and public money, but it's showing the way forward.
OK, so they were asking you further information about the property?
But even here, staff like Monica Gutsmore are still concerned about the cuts to come.
It's an uncertain world kind of thing, and I look at it as being not just a change or cuts within the council, but it's cuts everywhere, really.
The bad news is that staffing reductions in neighbourhood centres will be dwarfed by the cuts that are on the way. The latest figures suggest that across the region, around 80,000 public sector staff could lose their jobs as a direct result of the spending review. That's around 15% of all public sector workers in the West Midlands. And unions representing public sector staff are far from impressed.
The bottom line is the people who are now being asked to pay for this financial and economic crisis are not the ones to blame, and the people who are to blame seem to be the ones who are getting away with it, and that's not fair.
And it's certainly not fair on Police Community Support Officer Paul Jackson, who has this message for the government.
Just to be mindful if there is going to be such an unbelievable amount of cuts, that we don't do the public service a disservice, and we can continue to police our neighbourhoods in the way that they should be policed.
But there's more. Research carried out by the West Midlands Regional Observatory suggests that a further 310,000 jobs could be lost in the private sector. Why? Because they're deemed to be either directly or indirectly dependent on public sector contracts.
We've taken a national study that suggests that for every public sector job that's lost, up to 4 jobs are under threat within the private sector, both within businesses that provide goods and services directly to public sector organisations, and also in turn the smaller companies that actually supply goods and services to them.
And some private sector firms are already feeling the pinch. This Birmingham-based electrical contractor has already made 15 people redundant after parts of the government's schools rebuilding programme were axed. Although it's currently busy with work on a new hotel, bosses are fearful about the future.
A lot less work, less employees, less stuff inside, unfortunately. But, you know, one has to curtail your activities outside to match the amount of work you've got at a given time.
But with many private firms still struggling in the current climate, many are asking the question, how can they meet the government's wish of creating extra jobs to employ those who are being made redundant in the public sector? Without help, groups representing small businesses say it just won't happen.
Well, we'd like to see some more help on tax breaks. We know that national insurance contributions, from the employer's perspective, they can take a holiday if they are a start-up business. But we need to see that for established businesses who would be expected to take on employees that are being laid off from the public sector.
But some companies are already taking on more staff. After the phenomenal success of its XF model, last week Jaguar Land Rover announced that it was reversing a decision to close one of its West Midlands factories. The company has also pledged billions of pounds worth of investment over the next decade and, more importantly, promised to create thousands of new jobs. Well, behind me, Birmingham's Museum and Art Gallery, the site of many free exhibitions throughout the year, but will they be free in the future? Here to discuss the cuts more are two of the region's most high-profile MPs. Laurie Burt, you're the Lib Dem MP for Solihull. 80,000 jobs going in the public sector, possibly 300,000 in the private sector. It's a bit of a bloodbath, isn't it?
I don't think bloodbath is the word that I would use. We have to put this in a little bit of context, I think. We're still spending £700 billion. That's 41% of our GDP, which is the same as we were spending in 2006. So given the fact that we're in the situation that we are, you know, we do have to make some cuts, but we're also really working hard to encourage industry, private industry as well.
But are you still committed to these cuts? There's rumours that the Lib Dems are getting restless about the scale of these cuts and the impact of them.
Well, we'll have to see. We just don't know exactly what's coming in the public spending review, I'm afraid. I just don't know what there's going to be. But after the announcements have been made, we'll have the opportunity to discuss and debate it. What we want to see from it is lots of encouragement for enterprise, better outcomes for the public money that we are spending, and overall as well, a very important commitment towards fairness and making sure that the lowest off are best looked after.
But we are going to have to see massive growth to sort of deal with these cuts. Otherwise, we could risk going bankrupt, couldn't we?
Yes, we do need growth, and that's why areas like the West Midlands are receiving additional help through the Regional Growth Fund. That's why we've reduced corporation tax. That's why in the encouragement, the national insurance holiday as well for companies who are taking on new staff. So all of these things are saying, look, the West Midlands is open for business and we want to work and create new jobs.
Ian Austin, MP for Dudley North, Labour MP. Now, tell me, I mean, Labour's still being blamed for a lot of these cuts. I mean, it's certainly something that I suppose some would say you should be ashamed of, the fact that, you know, these cuts came on your watch.
Well, look, the reason we're in this position is because we had a worldwide economic crisis, which which caused the difficulties that we've had.
But Labour also, they made credit a lot easier throughout their period. I mean, you can't just blame the economic climate, can you?
Look, we haven't got a deficit because we employed record numbers of police officers or built new schools and hospitals right across the West Midlands. When we went into the economic downturn, we had one of the lowest levels of debt of any of our competitors. The reason we've got this problem is because of the financial crisis. And actually, our debt to GDP ratio is still lower than many of our competitors even today. But what we've got to do, the easiest way of tackling the deficit, of course, there've got to be savings. And you know, we set out today plans for a £7 billion tax on bankers who contribute to this problem in the first place. But everybody knows the easiest way to tackle these things is by going for growth, by building a stronger economy. That's the way, by getting more people into work, paying taxes, not as we saw in your film, on the dole and claiming benefits.
Now, I mean, you as a government were talking about £60 billion worth of cuts. The new government's talking about over £80 billion worth. I mean, they're not that far different, are they?
But look, it's about the timing and the scale of the cuts and the severity too. We set out detailed plans for savings in a Home Office budget and in areas like education as well. But what we said was that we shouldn't be cutting until the recovery is secure. And I'm very worried that that these plans are not just unfair, hitting hard-working families and poorest people hardest, but they're also reckless because they could stop the recovery in its tracks.
One final question. You, as a government, were writing blank cheques ahead of the election. One of the blank cheques was for the Midland Metro tram scheme. That's likely to be cut on Wednesday. I mean, it's not promising things that you can't deliver. Surely that's not good government.
I don't think we wrote any blank cheques at all. I think everything we set out was...
Liam Burns said there was no money left. He wrote a letter.
He wrote this jokey note. But the truth is, you know, The reason we're in this position is is not because of the investments we made to public services in the West Midlands, the record number of teachers and police officers that we employed. It's because we had a worldwide economic crisis. We went into it with lower debt levels than many of our competitors, and the way we'll get out of it is by growing the economy, not cutting it.
And Laura, what do you make? You were laughing when I was talking about blank
I
cheques.
just can't believe he's saying that. Labour have had a 13-year spending spree. National debt has doubled under Labour. We've got more debt than anyone else in the G20, and Ian Austin thinks that we're going to spend our way out of it and spend some more money. We've got to get this get this bull by the horns now before we go into the same situation as many of the countries like Italy and Spain.
Laura, Ian, many thanks. Well, all will be revealed, hopefully, in the spending review announcement on Wednesday.
Peter and your guests there in Chamberlain Square, thank you very much indeed. And of course, you can follow all the news of the spending review throughout this coming week on Midlands Today, online and on your BBC local radio station. Your calls and emails coming in thick and fast. Phil from Stoke-on-Trent says he'd begin by cutting the number of councillors in each authority by 50%. John Lyons, oh dear, he could mean you. Stuart Jennings from Derby, he said we should cut housing benefit for people who are in work. Much more of those where they come from. Now, if you want to keep up to speed with developments during what will be a crucial week, you can go to my blog at bbc.co.uk/Patrick Burns. You can also watch this programme all over again through the magic of the BBC iPlayer anytime over the next 7 days. Now, next week, we'll be debating the impact of the spending review in a special programme that'll be live from West Bromwich. That's next week. For now, though, it's back to John Sopel.